Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of Chase. If you're listening on a podcast platform, there obviously won't be anything playing in the background video-wise. If you're on YouTube, there may be PS5 gameplay in the background, there may not. I'm deciding currently whether to continue with the gameplay or to just get a set background that I can put these stories over. As the gameplay aspect of these videos has been taking a little bit longer than I expected to put together. Also, it feels very ancillary, like not the main point of the videos, so we'll see. But if you're on YouTube, don't be surprised if soon the videos start having just a set background and no PS5 gameplay. Today's story will be the first installment of Outpost 19, the next series that will be released episodically on this channel. As always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe and be on the lookout for the next installment of Outpost 19, in addition to many short story times, the one-shot story series that has been releasing on this channel. Now, without further ado, I give you Outpost 19, Part 1. The sky shimmers, orange and magenta swirling together above the Matangian pines. Soray looks up towards the horizon high above the treetops, her helmet fogging up from the heat of her breath. She signals for the window clearance with her left thumb, activating the wipers within the suit. She steals a glance back at the cluster of structures behind her. Matangian, Outpost 19. Home. She knows these trips are necessary. Knows the radiation has dropped to a safe, a funny word all things considered, level beyond the shelter belt forest. And yet she could never shake the feeling of dread as she treads one foot after the other, away from family, from safety, and into the expanse. Soil gives way as she steps into the forest. It feels as if it is hugging her feet, welcoming her back. It gets looser and hotter as she makes her way through the trees and away from 19. The robust pines begin to get thinner and thinner until Soray finds herself in the familiar land of the sticks. Stunted, half-formed bits of wood jut from loose, hot soil. She wonders how they even remain standing as her feet burn in the shifting sands. It may have been a millennia in Matangian years since the Alliance had bombed the planet. It may have happened on the complete opposite side of the satellite world, and still nearly everything on the surface ached under the strain of the poison. Only Outposts 19, 409, and 3301 had survived through that time, down from the 5,000 that had existed at the time of the bombing. The shelter belts and good government had kept the final 3 communities going. All the others had gone by the wayside from radiation, starvation, or mutiny. At 4 different points in the past 1,000 years, Outpost 19 had to repel raiding attacks from other outposts. Many of these raiding parties had been summarily executed. The citizens of Outpost 19 captured others, assimilating them into their outpost. These newcomers and their offspring were often given the worst positions for the first 4 or 5 generations. Soray's great-grandparents and her grandmother had been a part of the last attempt, from the now extinct Outpost 13. Soray wades out into the dune that has risen up around her. Spare pines punch through the surface here and there, while wisps of sandy fallout soil twist and dance around them. The suits Soray and other linewalkers are given for this solemn task are airtight, made of 5 distinct layers of material. On the bottom is the neoprene skin, covering the walker's inner layer of epidermis from their toes up to their fingers and over the top of their head. Each layer, each suit was made special for the walker who would wear it. Any inconsistencies in the fit could mean sand in your suit, on your skin, in your lungs. Soray had seen firsthand the horrors that followed this kind of exposure. After the neoprene skin came 4 mechanized layers, one right on top of the other. The lightest of these layers was almost like the first layer, a soft and malleable synthetic polymer, an all-one piece that zipped up and velcroed along her spine. The third and fourth were in 2 pieces each, a leg section and a torso-arm section. The outer layer was made up of 11 distinct pieces, all locking into place with special air seals around the joints. These layers helped the Linewalkers mightily in the pursuit of not dying amongst the pines. New fan systems that constantly cleared the area between the layers and the all-important fourth layer had been added 10 years ago when Apollo, the last Linewalker to die, came back from the pines. The soil had crept in between every crevice on his suit, sifting in between his skin and the neoprene layer. What was once his greatest protectant had become the bane of his existence as the neoprene hugged and ground the radioactive sand into his body, burning his back, his chest, his legs into bleeding asteroids, cratered and pockmarked. By the time they had peeled the suit from him, pulling chunks of skin while they did, he was already almost dead. Weak, death-rattling sighs emitted from his mouth for 15 minutes or so, interspersed with gurgling blood bubbling through his lips. Then, his ruined body, still leaking blood from 1,000 unnatural pores, turned ashen and gray. The sighs stopped, the body slumped, and the Linewalkers refused to go beyond the pines for a full rotation and a half around their distant sun. Soray was just a child, still years away from walking the line, but she couldn't understand why they had agreed to go back out. The image of Apollo was burned into her mind's eye, coughing, sputtering, dying. Soray was mortified and participated fully in the strikes that followed. Not that she had much choice, being a child and everything. She and the other Linewalkers, already social pariahs by many measures, began parading about Outpost 19, walking from edge to edge, but never beyond the pines, chanting and jeering, "Airlocks or we don't walk, airlocks or we don't walk." It had worked in part. The all-important fourth layer was added, which included the airlock for layers below and the fan system for the space between the fourth and fifth layer. Public attitude had fluctuated wildly in that time, though. Right after Apollo's death, the entirety of Outpost 19 agreed that the business of line-walking was grisly, gruesome, and truly unnecessary. Within weeks, though, with Apollo in the ground and his haunting visage no longer in front of them, the people of Outpost 19 got antsy. It started with the current Centurion, Ambin Lydell's campaign. Graham Mecius was the Centurion when Apollo died. Their policies following his death were heavily focused upon the safety of linewalkers, suit improvements, and a conducive relationship between linewalkers and the residents of Matangian 19. Though this was a 180-degree shift, it felt more than necessary after everyone had just watched Apollo die. Then, Ambin Lydell started making stump speeches all over the outpost about public safety. He always started the speech by referencing Apollo and the other linewalkers like him who had made the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of Outpost 19 and their fellow citizens. This glowing, exalted rhetoric almost always flipped to a discussion of the many still living, breathing linewalkers, lily-livered, yellow-bellied cowards when compared to the lion of public safety that was Apollo. Gradually, 19ers who were not linewalkers forgot the grisly end that Apollo had met, or glorified it to such a degree that it was something to be aspired to in their minds. Soray can still remember being caught in the market with her grandmother, surrounded by angry faces, screaming at them, demanding that they go back out and walk the line once more. She also remembers Lydell's vitriolic words vividly, how they'd burned through the outpost like wildfire. Apollo's martyrification for the cause of Outpost 19 was built up so high, most people could hardly remember the unionized front that remained within the ranks of linewalkers. Soray, her parents, and her grandmother had been harassed each time they stepped out of their huts and into the common areas of Outpost 19. Within this climate, it was honestly astonishing to Soray that the suit modifications had been pushed through. A perfect confluence of citizens wanting the line walked again, and the linewalkers refusing to do so in the same suit design that Apollo had perished in, came together nearly 2 Matangian years after his death into the suit modifications and a resumption of the line being walked. Soray had come of age a year later, benefiting exactly 0 days in her linewalker career from the strike that had become so inextricable from the position. Even still, Centurion Lydell continues to beat the anti-union, anti-linewalker drum in an attempt to sway public opinion once again and secure another term in office. Maybe this was why Soray waded out so far, she thinks to herself as the sand begins to push up towards her knees. The heat is inescapable at this point, sending waterfalls down her calves and into her shoes as her lower legs bake in the radioactive oven of a dune. Her steps at this point are extremely laborious, the sand shifting beneath her feet and pushing back against her shins as she turns into the slight groove that she has made over the past few weeks. Sweat beads pepper the neoprene layer all over her upper body, turning it moist, slick, and sticky as it flows down into the soaking bottom half. Other linewalkers wouldn't dare come out half the distance that Soray now finds herself at, many of them former co-workers of Apollo and participants in the strike. The suit modifications had gotten the linewalkers back patrolling the perimeter of Outpost 19, but it had not solved many of the underlying issues that fueled the strike. Linewalkers still felt like second-class citizens, martyrs in waiting, like Apollo, who had to risk life and limb for the true citizens of the Outpost. Their simmering rage was constantly nurtured by Lydell's stump speeching and his followers' less than occasional violent outbursts. In the 5 years since Soray had started walking the line, 3 of her fellow linewalkers had been assaulted, with the perpetrators never serving more than a few weeks in the Outpost holding cell. Soray keeps trudging through the nuclear sand, her suit's fan working overtime as it blasts a small cloud constantly about Soray's waist. She had insulated herself from this violence, had separated herself from the union of linewalkers quite intentionally, with these walks far beyond the union's agreed-upon line. She had passed their trench nearly 500 meters before she got to hers, a well-grooved necklace that neatly skirts the exact edge of the pine shelter belt. Soray was much maligned in linewalker circles for taking this stance and venturing so far past the union's line. It was dangerous in many of their minds, and it definitely made the union look bad. Soray doesn't care, though, she thinks as she rounds the northwest corner of the outpost and turns south. The suit modifications had proved sufficient. She hadn't ended up like Apollo yet, and she was the last generation of linewalker in her family. She didn't want to align herself with their union. She wanted to align herself with the citizenry of Outpost 19. A citizenry she wanted so badly to be a part of, one that her children would belong to. Walking a few hundred meters past the agreed-upon line was a small price to pay if it expedited that process in any way. Soray keeps going, keeping the pine shelter belt in sight off to her left as the Borealis continues swirling off to her right. As she approaches the southern boundary of her adjusted line, she thinks she can see something in the dunes below the lights. She stops, her suit's fan droning in her ears as she squints her eyes, trying to bring the conflagration into view. This is why you walk out so far, she thinks to herself, trying to suppress the excitement. She had laid awake many nights, dreaming about being the linewalker to stop the next raid. Imagined badges bearing the insignia of Outposts 409 or 3301, depending on the evening, had swirled in her mind as it took her on the magic carpet ride of a best-case scenario. First, she takes down the raiders, stymieing their attempt and possibly heading the protective force against subsequent raiding waves. Then, overcome with the human debt that existed, the citizens of Outpost 19 and Centurion Lydell would welcome her into their club with open arms. She would be a citizen, a full vested member of Outpost 19. Maybe she wouldn't even have to walk the line anymore. Though her logical brain usually stopped her dizzying rise to the top here, suggesting that Outpost 19 would not be willing to part with their best line walker and savior from the nefarious raiding plot so soon after said saving. Soray can feel her palms begin to itch and sweat in her suit as she squeezes her left hand into a fist, enhancing her view of the distant sojourner in the sand. It is definitely a human, their arms flailing with effort as their bottom half soldiers through the sand of the expanse. Their feet and legs are buried, but Soray can make out the gradual shifting, left, then right, of the figure's torso as they move ever closer to her. This image makes her heart pound quicker in her ears, her fantasy of stopping a raiding plot seemingly coming to life before her eyes. But this was not the image of her fantasy. She had always extrapolated at least 4 raiders, probably more, relying on logic and her grandmother's first-hand accounts. as shaky as they may be, coming from a raider who was a mere 6 years old at the time. Even the fact that her grandmother was a 6-year-old raider had always told Soray that they would come in groups, if not droves. She would have to be ready for quick, decisive action that neutralized multiple raiders. Never once had she thought it would be a single person. The hammering in her ears subsides ever so slightly, sinking to a pit in her stomach as she watches the figure's waist and upper thighs coming unearthed from the sand. Their body nearly fills her enhanced screen now, prompting her to squeeze her left hand once again and zoom back out. She squeezes her fist again as the image comes into view, trying to zoom out further and failing. How had they gotten so close? She must have let her guard down while zoomed in, losing herself in thought. This wasn't the kind of behavior that would get her citizenship as a Linewalker. The figure in the distance raises their arm in what looks like a wave. Soray panics, the pit in her stomach pulling her body into a dive behind the small bluff of sand on the far side of her path. Her heartbeat returns to her ears as she pulls out her standard-issue electroshock cannon and closes her eyes, trying to calm her nerves with long, slow breaths as she thinks back, trying to gauge the distance between herself and whoever was approaching. How far were they when they waved? They couldn't have been more than 30 meters, she thinks to herself, taking one last deep breath. She hopes she is right, has to be right, when she rises from the bluff, cannon extended before her. The figure is a mere 15 meters away, well within distance, but their arms are raised above their head. "Please, I come in peace," they begin to say before Soray squeezes the cannon's trigger, sending a burst of light from the barrel. The figure dives to the right, but a tendril of electricity jets out from the main shaft and crackles around their suit like a mini thunderstorm. The figure falls, their body sending a puff of atomic sand into the Matangian air around them. Before she knows what she is doing, Soray is stumbling up and over the dune around her line-walking path, pushing through the sand and over to the figure. As she reaches them, their suit powers back on, coughing and sputtering clouds of sand from the egresses from strikingly similar fans. Alright, everybody, you just listened to part 1 of Outpost 19 on the Chronicles of Chase. Please be on the lookout for part 2 and short story times to be released in the next week or so on this channel. And as always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. This has been the Chronicles of Chase.